Admiral Zexathara looked at the data screen with mild interest. Another primitive world had been found. The third planet of a yellow star system contained a species that called itself human. The report said they had basic space travel and nuclear weapons. Nothing special. Nothing that would cause problems for the great Corvan Empire. "How many ships do they have?" Zexathara asked his aide. "Very few, Admiral. Maybe 100 small vessels. They seem to use chemical rockets mostly. Some newer ships use fusion drives." Zexathara made a dismissive sound. Chemical rockets. How pathetic. The Corvans had conquered 847 worlds across the galaxy. Most species surrendered as soon as they saw Corvan warships. Those who fought back were crushed within days. "Send a standard conquest fleet. Third level should be enough," he ordered. Meanwhile, near Jupiter's largest moon, Captain Jake Miller stood on the bridge of the human ship Terra Nova. His crew was doing routine patrol when sensors picked up something strange. "Captain, we have unknown contacts approaching," called out Lieutenant Amy Foster from her station. "3 ships. Design unknown." Jake looked at the display. The ships were sleek and dark, much larger than anything humans had built. They moved with perfect formation like they had done this many times before. "Try to make contact, Amy. Standard peaceful greeting protocols." Amy sent out radio signals in multiple languages, math sequences, music, anything that might show friendly intent. The alien ships did not respond at first. Then a harsh voice came through the speakers. "Primitive creatures of the Third World, you will submit to Corvan authority. Prepare to be boarded." Jake and his crew looked at each other in surprise. The voice spoke perfect English, which meant these aliens had been watching humans for some time. "This is Captain Jake Miller of the human vessel Terra Nova. We come in peace. We would like to establish diplomatic relations with your people." There was a long pause. Then the alien voice returned, sounding confused and angry. "You dare to negotiate? You are a primitive species. You have no authority to make demands. Submit now or face destruction." The lead alien ship fired a warning shot that passed close to Terra Nova. The beam weapon left a glowing trail in space. Jake realized his ship's hull would not survive a direct hit from such a weapon. But instead of running or surrendering, Jake did something the aliens did not expect. He moved his ship closer to theirs. "We do not submit to anyone," Jake said calmly. "If you want to talk, we talk as equals. If you want to fight, we will defend ourselves." The alien commander, Veltar, had never heard such words from a primitive species. In 800 conquests, every species had either surrendered immediately or begged for mercy after the first show of force. These humans seemed different. Veltar decided to capture some human ships for study. His orders were to learn about new species before full conquest began. 3 more human vessels arrived during the standoff. 2 were military ships like Terra Nova. 1 was a civilian transport carrying families to a mining station. The Corvan ships easily overpowered the human vessels. Their shields absorbed human weapons fire without damage. Their tractor beams pulled the human ships into their cargo bays like toys. Dr. Ben Carter was aboard the civilian transport when it was captured. As a scientist who studied life forms, he found himself fascinated by his captors even while imprisoned. The Corvans were tall and thin, with gray skin and large black eyes. They moved with cold efficiency and spoke in harsh, clipped sentences. But Ben noticed something important. The Corvans followed exact procedures for everything. They never changed their methods or tried new approaches. When Ben asked questions about their technology or culture, they seemed confused by his curiosity. On Earth, General Lisa Hayes received the last transmission from Jake Miller before communications were cut. The message was brief, but alarming. "Large, alien fleet approaching. Hostile intent confirmed. They have superior technology. Recommend immediate military mobilization. This is not a peaceful first contact." Lisa immediately activated emergency protocols. Every military base on Earth and in the colonies received urgent orders. Scientists worked around the clock to analyze the fragments of data from the encounter near Jupiter. Dr. Elena Vasquez led a team trying to understand alien technology from sensor readings. The energy signatures were unlike anything in human science. But Elena noticed patterns in how the alien ships moved and fought. They were powerful but predictable. They fight like a machine, she told her team. Same formation, same tactics. If we can figure out their pattern, we might find weaknesses. Meanwhile, in deep space, Admiral Zexathera received Veltar's report about the human encounter. The Weetbo, primitive species, had refused to surrender. They had tried to negotiate as equals. Some had even shown curiosity about Corvan culture instead of proper fear. Interesting, Zexathera mused. Most species panic when they see our ships. These humans seem different. His aide looked at the data. Should we send a larger fleet, Admiral? No. Veltar can handle a few primitive ships. Begin standard conquest. Procedures. The humans will learn to obey like all the others. But Veltar was discovering that humans were not like other species. The captured prisoners did not beg for mercy or offer to serve the Corvans. Instead, they asked questions. They observed everything. They tried to understand their captors rather than simply fear them. Dr. Ben Carter had been watching his guards for weeks. He learned their schedules, their habits, their weaknesses. More importantly, he learned how they thought. The Corvans believed absolutely in their own superiority. They had never met a species that challenged their assumptions. Jake, Miller, held in a different cell, was also learning. He memorized the layout of the Corvan ship. He studied their technology. He listened to their conversations when they thought he could not understand their language. Both men came to the same conclusion. The Corvans were powerful, but inflexible. They had conquered hundreds of worlds using the same methods every time. They expected fear and submission. They did not know how to handle a species that refused to be intimidated. Back on Earth, General Lisa Hayes was preparing humanity's first interstellar war. She had no idea how powerful the enemy was, or when they would attack. But she knew one thing that the Corvans did not yet understand about humans. They never gave up. 3 months had passed since first contact. The Corvan Third Fleet moved through space toward Earth like a deadly storm. Fleet Commander Gexmore sat in his command chair, confident and relaxed. 200 warships followed his flagship. This was enough firepower to destroy any primitive civilization. Time to Earth system, he asked. 6 hours, Commander, replied his navigation officer. Gexmore smiled. By tomorrow, another world would bow to Corvan rule. The humans would join the hundreds of other species serving the Empire. It would be quick and simple, just like always. On Earth, Admiral Kate Sullivan watched the approaching enemy fleet on her tactical display. The alien ships were massive and powerful. Humanity had spent 3 months preparing for this moment, but their defenses looked small and weak compared to what was coming. All stations report ready, Admiral, said her communications officer. Kate nodded. Earth's defense fleet consisted of military ships, converted civilian vessels, and orbital weapon platforms. Everything humanity could build or modify in 3 months of desperate preparation. Signal all ships. Remember the plan. We cannot match their firepower, so we use speed and surprise. Make every shot count. Commander Ryan Blake commanded a squadron of modified mining ships in the asteroid belt. His vessels looked nothing like warships. They were ugly industrial machines built for cutting rock and hauling ore, but Ryan had spent weeks preparing them for something very different. Mining. Charges ready? He asked his crew. All charges armed and ready, Commander. The asteroids are positioned exactly where you wanted them. Ryan watched his display as the Corvan fleet approached. The aliens moved in perfect formation, just like their intelligence report suggested. Predictable. That was their weakness. Meanwhile, Dr. Elena Vasquez worked frantically in her underground laboratory. Her team had been studying the captured Corvan technology around the clock. They had learned amazing things about alien science, but more importantly, they had found problems in Corvan designs. Their shields are powerful, but they reset every few seconds, she explained to her team. During that reset, they are vulnerable for exactly 0.3 seconds. Not long, but enough. Above Earth's atmosphere, the two fleets met in humanity's first major space battle. Corvan ships opened fire with devastating energy weapons. Human ships scattered in all directions, refusing to fight in formation like the Corvans expected. Captain Troy Washington commanded the human vessel Freedom. His ship was smaller and lighter than the enemy vessels, but it moved like a dancer through space. Corvan weapons fired where his ship had been, not where it was going. Target their weapon clusters, Troy ordered. Elena's data shows they cannot shoot and maintain shields at the same time. Freedom dove toward a Corvan cruiser, firing everything it had. The human weapons were weaker, but they hit during the shield reset window. Explosions bloomed along the alien ship's hull. The Corvan commander Gexmore watched in growing anger as human ships refused to fight properly. They attacked from unexpected angles. They used the planet's gravity to change direction suddenly. Some even rammed his ships with suicide attacks that no rational species would attempt. Why do they not fight in formation, he demanded. This is chaos, not warfare. But the chaos was working. Human losses were heavy, but they were destroying Corvan ships that should have been invincible. Admiral Kate Sullivan coordinated the battle from her flagship, sending ships where they were needed most. In the asteroid belt, Ryan Blake watched the perfect moment arrive. Half the Corvan fleet had moved past his hidden position, chasing human ships toward Earth. Their formation was exactly as expected. Now, he ordered. Mining charges exploded throughout the asteroid belt. Massive rocks accelerated toward the Corvan, ships like giant bullets. The aliens had shields designed to stop energy weapons, not solid objects moving at incredible speed. Corvan ships exploded as asteroids punched through their hulls. The perfect formation became a disaster zone, filled with debris and dying vessels. Gexmore watched a quarter of his fleet disappear in minutes. Dr. Elena Vasquez monitored the battle from her bunker. Her scientists had given humanity every advantage they could find. Shield timing data, weapon vulnerabilities, navigation patterns. But she knew the real advantage was something the Corvans could not understand. Humans adapted. When their first attack failed, they tried something different. When the enemy changed tactics, humans changed faster. Every failure became a lesson for the next attack. The battle raged for 6 days. Corvan reinforcements arrived, but so did human ships from the outer colonies. Mining vessels became warships. Cargo haulers carried explosives for suicide runs. Civilian ships evacuated refugees and brought supplies to the fighting fleet. Captain Jake Miller, recently freed from Corvan captivity, led a desperate attack on the enemy flagship. His ship Terra Nova had been badly damaged in the fighting, but he refused to retreat. All power to engines, he ordered. We are going to ram their command ship. Captain, that will kill us all, his navigation officer warned. Maybe, but it will also kill their commander. Fair trade. Terra Nova accelerated toward the massive Corvan flagship. Enemy weapons blazed at the small human ship, but Jake held course. At the last second, he changed direction and fired every weapon into the flagship's command section. Fleet Commander Gexmore died when Jake's attack destroyed his bridge. Without their leader, the Corvan fleet began to fall apart. Different ships had different orders. No one knew who was in command. Admiral Eo. Kate Sullivan saw the moment and acted. All ships, general attack. Hit them while they are confused. The human fleet struck like a hammer. Corvan ships tried to retreat, but human vessels followed them beyond Earth's orbit. For the first time in Corvan history, a primitive species had defeated them in open battle. Captain Troy Washington commanded the pursuit force that chased the surviving enemy ships toward the edge of the solar system. His ship Freedom became the first human vessel to fight beyond Neptune's orbit. Do not let them regroup, Kate Sullivan ordered over the radio. Keep hitting them until they are gone. The survivors of the Third Fleet finally escaped into hyperspace, but they left behind wreckage and bodies. Gexmore's replacement sent a final message to Corvan High Command before fleeing. The humans fight like no species we have encountered. They do not fear death. They do not surrender. They adapt to everything we do. This is not a normal conquest. This is war. Admiral Zexathara received the report in disbelief. A primitive species had destroyed most of the Third Fleet. Gexmore was dead. The survivors spoke of human tactics. That made no sense to Corvan military doctrine. Impossible, he said. No primitive species has ever defeated a Corvan fleet. But the evidence was clear. Humanity had won its first victory against the Galactic Empire. The war was just beginning. 6 months after the Battle of Earth, humanity had changed completely. The single world that once struggled to reach its own moon now had colonies spreading across dozens of star systems. The war had pushed human technology forward by hundreds of years in just months. Colonel Alex Turner crept through the shadows of a Corvan military base on the planet Nexus Prime. His stealth suit bent light around him, making him nearly invisible. This was humanity's first deep reconnaissance mission into enemy territory, and Alex had volunteered to lead it. He watched Corvan soldiers patrol the base with the same mechanical precision they had shown in battle. They followed exact routes, at exact times. No variation, no creativity. Alex smiled grimly as he recorded their patterns with his hidden cameras. "They never change," he whispered into his radio. "Same guards, same routes, every single day." Back on Earth, Dr. Rachel Brooks received Alex's transmission through humanity's newest breakthrough. Her team had cracked the secret of instant communication across vast distances by combining human innovation with captured alien technology. The Corvans use the same tactics on every world they conquer, Rachel told her research team. They have not changed their methods in over 1,000 years. That is their weakness. Rachel's discovery was revolutionary. For the first time, human forces across the galaxy could coordinate their attacks perfectly. While Corvan commanders waited hours or days for messages to travel between star systems, humans could plan and execute complex operations in real time. Meanwhile, Corvan Supreme Admiral Thex Nara studied disturbing intelligence reports in his command center. The humans were not behaving like other conquered species. Instead of hiding and begging for mercy, they were expanding aggressively into disputed territories. "Show me the human expansion data," he ordered his aide. The holographic display filled with red dots representing human colonies and military bases. In 6 months, they had spread to 47 different star systems. Each new base was heavily defended by increasingly sophisticated weapons. "How is this possible?" Thexanara demanded. "They were primitive 6 months ago." "They learn very quickly, Admiral. Every battle teaches them new lessons. Every captured ship gives them new technology. They adapt faster than any species we have encountered." On the frontier world of Kepler 442b, Commander Maya Rodriguez prepared for humanity's most ambitious operation yet. Intelligence reports said the planet held thousands of enslaved Zilani, a peaceful species that the Corvans had conquered decades earlier. Maya's task force consisted of 20 human ships and twice as many support vessels. They had spent weeks planning the liberation of Kepler 442b, using tactics that no other species had ever attempted. "Remember," Maya told her officers, "we are not here to conquer. We are here to free the Zilani and show them that the Corvans can be defeated." The attack began at dawn. Human ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect coordination, surrounding the Corvan garrison before they could react. The enemy had superior firepower, but they were outnumbered and caught completely by surprise. Corvan Commander Vexthon tried to mount a defense, but the humans fought unlike any enemy he had faced. They used captured Corvan weapons against their former owners. They broadcast messages to the enslaved Zilani, encouraging them to rise up against their oppressors. "Impossible," Vexthon said as he watched Zilani workers destroy Corvan equipment throughout the planet. The slave species never. But the Zilani had been waiting for this moment for 30 years. When they saw human ships defeating their Corvan masters, they found courage they had forgotten they possessed. The uprising spread across the planet like wildfire. Within hours, Kepler 442b was free. The surviving Corvan forces surrendered or fled. Maya Rodriguez became the first human to liberate an alien world from Corvan occupation. The freed Zilani leader, an elderly female named Sixara, met with Maya after the battle. Tears flowed down her blue-scaled face as she spoke. "We had given up hope," she said in broken English that the humans had taught her through their radio broadcasts. "You have given us back our lives, our freedom, our future." But the Zilani offered. something even more valuable than gratitude. They shared 30 years of intelligence about Corvan operations, military bases, and the locations of other enslaved worlds. There are hundreds of species under Corvan rule, Sixara explained. Most have forgotten what freedom means, but if you can show them that the Corvans can be beaten, they will rise up everywhere. The liberation of Kepler 442b sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Secret communications began reaching human forces from enslaved species on dozens of worlds. They offered information, sabotage, and promises of uprising if human forces could reach them. Dr. Rachel Brooks coordinated these communications from her command center on Earth. Her new communication network allowed humanity to stay in contact with resistance groups across the galaxy. The entire Corvan Empire is like a house built on sand, she reported to military command. Their control depends on fear and the belief that they cannot be defeated. We have shattered that belief. Colonel Alex Turner, still deep in Corvan territory, confirmed Rachel's assessment. His reconnaissance missions revealed an empire in growing panic. Corvan forces were being reassigned from peaceful garrison duty to combat operations. Their rigid military system was breaking down under the stress of fighting an enemy they did not understand. Their soldiers are trained for intimidation and occupation, Alex reported. They have no experience fighting a real war against an equal opponent. Every battle we win makes them more afraid. Corvan Governor Yexkala submitted an urgent report to Supreme Admiral Thex Nara after losing 3 more worlds to human liberation forces. The humans represent an existential threat to imperial stability, he wrote. They do not fight for conquest or resources. They fight to free others from our rule. Every species they liberate becomes their ally. This is not a normal war. This is a revolution that could destroy everything we have built. Thex Nara read the report with growing alarm. For 1,000 years, the Corvan Empire had expanded without serious opposition. They had never faced an enemy that grew stronger with each battle, that turned their own subjects against them. Double the garrison forces on all occupied worlds, he ordered. Increase patrols in disputed territories, and send a message to High Command. We need reinforcements. But even as Thex Nara issued his orders, human forces were preparing new operations across the galaxy. Maya Rodriguez had proven that Corvan worlds could be liberated. Other human commanders were planning similar attacks on dozens of targets. The war was no longer about Earth's survival. It had become a struggle for the freedom of every enslaved species in the galaxy, and humanity had learned that they were very good at winning that kind of fight. On Earth, General Lisa Hayes reviewed the strategic situation with her staff. 6 months ago, they had been fighting desperately just to survive. Now they were liberating worlds and gaining allies across the galaxy. The Corvans made one fatal mistake, she told her officers. They assumed we would react like every other species they had conquered. They thought we would be afraid. Instead, we got angry. And angry, humans are the most dangerous force in the universe. 2 years had passed since the first human ship met Corvan scouts near Jupiter. The galaxy was no longer the same place. What began as a simple conquest had become the Corvan Empire's worst nightmare. Admiral Chris Parker stood on the bridge of his flagship defiant as the human armada approached Kepler Station. This massive Corvan fortress controlled shipping routes between 12 star systems. Its capture would cut the Empire in half. All ships report ready, Admiral, said his communications officer. Chris nodded. His fleet contained ships from 6 different species, all fighting together under human command. The Zilani provided fast scout vessels. The Morvac contributed heavy weapons platforms. The Centauri brought their knowledge of Corvan technology. United, they were unstoppable. Begin the attack, Chris ordered. The Battle of Kepler Station lasted 3 days. Human tactics had evolved far beyond the desperate improvisation of Earth's defense. Now they fought with precision and overwhelming coordination. Every ship knew its role. Every attack supported the others. Corvan defenders found themselves facing enemies that seemed to anticipate their every move. When they tried standard defensive formations, human forces attacked from unexpected angles. When they adapted their tactics, the humans had already moved to counter their new strategy. Commander Veltar, The same Corvin who had captured the first human ships now defended Kepler Station. He watched in horror as his powerful fortress was systematically destroyed by forces he no longer recognized as primitive. "These are not the same humans," he reported to his superiors as explosions rocked his command center. "They fight like they have been doing this for centuries. How did they learn so much so quickly?" The answer came from Dr. Sam Mitchell, working in his research laboratory aboard a human science vessel. Sam had spent months studying captured Corvin officers, trying to understand how their minds worked. "The Corvins cannot adapt," Sam explained to Admiral Parker during a brief pause in the battle. "Their entire culture is built on the idea that they are naturally superior. When reality contradicts this belief, they become confused and make mistakes. They literally cannot learn from failure because they refuse to admit failure is possible." This discovery changed everything. Human forces began using psychological warfare alongside their military attacks. They broadcast messages showing Corvin defeats to enslaved worlds. They demonstrated that the mighty empire could be beaten by anyone with enough courage to try. General Karen Stone commanded the human liberation fleet that swept through the Rigel sector, freeing 17 worlds in 2 months. Each liberated planet provided new allies, new resources, and new intelligence about Corvin weaknesses. "The Empire is collapsing from within," Karen reported to Earth Command. "Their own subjects are turning against them faster than we can reach. New systems. We have started something that no longer needs us to continue." Captain Nick Johnson specialized in covert operations deep behind enemy lines. His teams had perfected the art of turning Corvin technology against the Empire itself. They hacked communication networks, sabotaged weapon systems, and spread propaganda that encouraged rebellion. "The Corvins built their empire on fear," Nick explained to his operatives before another mission. "Our job is to replace that fear with hope. Show people that freedom is possible, and they will fight for it themselves." On the Corvin homeworld, Empress Zexithara took personal command of the war effort. She was the most powerful ruler in galactic history, commanding forces that had conquered nearly 1,000 worlds. But for the first time in her long life, she was losing. "How many systems have we lost this month?" she asked her military council. 43, Your Imperial Majesty. The rebellions are spreading faster than we can suppress them. Our forces are stretched across too many fronts." Zexithara studied the tactical displays with growing desperation. Red dots marked human victories. Yellow dots showed worlds in rebellion. Blue dots indicated systems still under Corvin control, but even those were shrinking daily. "Double the conscription quotas," she ordered. "Strip the home fleet if necessary. We must stop the human advance before it reaches the core worlds." But traditional Corvin tactics were useless against an enemy that thrived on chaos and improvisation. Every time they concentrated forces to crush one human fleet, 3 more appeared elsewhere. Every world they recaptured was lost again within weeks. Dr. Linda Davis made the discovery that ended the war. Working with captured Corvin communication equipment, her team found the Empire's greatest weakness. The same technology that allowed them to control 1,000 worlds could be turned against them. Their entire command structure depends on this communication network, Linda explained to human leadership. "If we can hack into it, we can coordinate attacks across the entire galaxy while simultaneously disrupting their ability to respond." The plan that emerged was called Operation Shattered Crown. Human forces would strike 50 key Corvin installations simultaneously, using the Empire's own communication system to coordinate the attacks. It was the most ambitious military operation in galactic history. Admiral Chris Parker commanded the main assault force targeting the Corvin Naval Academy at Vega Prime. General Karen Stone led attacks on 3 major shipyards in the Orion sector. Captain Nick Johnson's covert teams prepared to sabotage critical infrastructure across 24 systems. "Remember," Chris told his fleet commanders before the operation began, "we are not just fighting for victory, we are fighting to free every enslaved species in the galaxy. Today we end the Corvin Empire forever." Operation Shattered Crown began at exactly the same moment across 50 star systems. Corvin defenders found themselves under attack everywhere at once. Their communication networks, hacked by human experts, carried contradictory orders and false information. Supreme Admiral Thexnara watched his command center dissolve into chaos as reports flooded in from across the Empire. Every major military installation was under attack. Rebellions had erupted on hundreds of worlds. His fleets were scattered and confused, unable to coordinate any effective response. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "How can they be everywhere, at once?" The answer was simple. Humanity had learned to fight as one species across an entire galaxy. They shared information instantly, coordinated perfectly, and adapted to every challenge. The Corvins, despite their superior technology, still fought like they were conquering primitive worlds one at a time. Within 72 hours, Operation Shattered Crown had succeeded beyond human expectations. The Corvin Empire's military structure collapsed completely. Their fleets were destroyed or scattered. Their communication networks were under human control. Empress Zexathara received the final reports in her throne room as human ships appeared in orbit above the Corvin homeworld. Her 1,000-year empire was finished. The species she had dismissed as primitive savages now controlled the galaxy. "Send a message to the human fleet," she ordered her aide. "Tell them the Corvin Empire surrenders unconditionally." Admiral Chris Parker received the surrender offer aboard his flagship as it approached the enemy capital. 2 years ago, humans had been fighting desperately just to survive. Now they had toppled the greatest empire in galactic history. "Signal all human forces," Chris ordered. "The war is over. We have won." But victory brought new responsibilities. Hundreds of species looked to humanity for leadership in rebuilding their shattered worlds. The galaxy needed a new order based on freedom rather than conquest. The real work was just beginning. 3 years after the first meeting between humans and Corvins, President Alan Foster stood before representatives from 300 different species. The Great Assembly Hall on Earth had been built specially for this moment. Today would mark the birth of a new galactic civilization. "We gather not as conquerors and conquered," Alan said. His voice carried to every world in the galaxy through the communication network humanity had perfected. "We gather as equals, united in our belief that all species deserve freedom and dignity." The speech became known throughout history as the Terran Doctrine. It established the principles that would guide the galaxy for generations to come. No species would rule over another. All worlds would govern themselves. Conflicts would be resolved through negotiation, not war. Admiral Sarah Clark commanded the final human fleet approaching the Corvin homeworld. Her orders were simple but unprecedented in galactic history. She was to accept the enemy's surrender and offer them a chance to join the new galactic community as equals. "Signal the Corvin leadership," Sarah ordered her communications officer. "Tell them we come in peace. Tell them the war is over, and they have a choice to make." On the planet's surface, former Empress Zexathara waited in what had once been her throne room. The symbols of her empire had been removed. The guards who had protected her for centuries were gone. She was no longer an empress. She was simply another person waiting to learn her fate. Dr. Carol Wells landed on the Corvin homeworld with the first humanitarian mission in galactic history. Her medical teams brought supplies and technology to help rebuild worlds devastated by centuries of war and oppression. "These people have been told they are superior for 1,000 years, Carol explained to her staff as they set up field hospitals. "Now they must learn to live as equals with species they once enslaved. It will not be easy for them." But Carol's teams did more than provide medical care. They showed the Corvins something they had never experienced before: mercy from their enemies, care from species they had oppressed, forgiveness when they expected punishment. Many Corvins could not understand this kindness. They had built their entire civilization on the belief that strength meant domination and weakness meant slavery. The human concept of helping former enemies was completely foreign to them. Captain Jim Baker was assigned to guard the former Empress during her trial for war crimes. He found her to be very different from what he had expected. Instead of a cruel dictator, he saw an old woman who seemed confused by how quickly her world had changed. "Why do you not execute me?" Zexathara asked him one day. "I ordered the deaths of millions. I enslaved entire species. By Corvin law, I deserve to die." Jim considered her question carefully. "Because we are not Corvins," he said finally. "We believe people can change. We believe justice is about preventing future harm, not just punishing past mistakes." Zexathara stared at him for a long moment. "We underestimated you completely," she said. "We thought you were like us. We thought you fought to conquer and rule. We never imagined you fought to free others." The trial of Corvan war criminals became a model for justice throughout the galaxy. Instead of executions and revenge, the courts focused on truth and reconciliation. Former oppressors worked alongside their former victims to rebuild damaged worlds. Commander Ashley Lee established the Galactic Defense Academy on Earth, where officers from hundreds of species came to learn human military philosophy. But the YAO Academy taught more than tactics and strategy. It taught cooperation, innovation, and the idea that strength came from protecting others rather than dominating them. "Military power exists to defend freedom," Ashley told her first class of students. "The moment you use it to take freedom away from others, you become the enemy of everything we fought to create." Students at the academy included former Corvan officers who had volunteered to serve the new galactic government. Many other species were suspicious of these former enemies, but humans insisted that everyone deserved a chance to choose a better path. 10 years after the war ended, Ambassador Paul Green represented humanity at the Galactic Council headquarters on New Geneva Station. The council included representatives from over 400 species, all working together to solve problems through discussion rather than force. Paul often reflected on how much the galaxy had changed. Trade flowed freely between worlds that had once been isolated under Corvan rule. Scientific knowledge was shared openly instead of being hoarded by the Empire. Art, music, and literature from hundreds of cultures enriched every world. The Corvans, ruled through fear, Paul explained to a group of young diplomats from various species. "We learned to lead through hope. That made all the difference." Dr. Janet Morgan, now elderly but still sharp, worked as humanity's chief xenoarchaeologist. Her job was to preserve the history of species that had almost been destroyed by Corvan oppression, but she also studied the Empire itself, trying to understand how such a system had lasted so long. In the ruins of a Corvan archive, Janet discovered something that made her laugh out loud. Ancient records showed that Corvan scouts had found Earth decades before first contact. Multiple reports recommended ignoring the planet entirely. "Primitive species, not worth the fuel costs," one report stated. "Recommend standard avoidance protocols." The records showed that various Corvan officials had dismissed humanity as too backward to bother with. They had considered Earth unworthy of even basic conquest operations. Janet preserved these documents in the Galactic Historical Archives as the Great Underestimation. They served as a permanent reminder of the dangers of assuming superiority over unfamiliar opponents. On Earth, a monument was built in Geneva to honor all the species who had suffered under Corvan rule. The inscription was written in over 600 languages representing every known intelligent species in the galaxy. When tyranny seemed eternal, one species taught the galaxy that freedom is worth fighting for, the monument read. Not through conquest, but through liberation. Not through domination, but through cooperation. This is the human gift to the stars. Former Empress Zexathara, now living quietly on a farming world as part of her rehabilitation, visited the monument during a diplomatic mission to Earth. She read the inscription and wept. "We could have learned from you," she told Ambassador Paul Green, who had accompanied her. "If we had approached you as friends instead of trying to conquer you, imagine what we might have built together." Paul nodded. "It's not too late," he said. "The galaxy we're building now includes everyone who chooses to participate. Even former enemies can become friends." As the years passed, children from hundreds of species grew up in a galaxy where freedom was normal and cooperation was expected. They learned about the old empire only in history classes, as an example of what happened when one species tried to rule all others. The human approach to governance became the standard throughout the galaxy. Problems were solved through discussion and compromise. Conflicts were resolved through mediation and mutual understanding. War became a last resort that was almost never necessary. Dr. Carol Wells, now running medical programs on dozens of worlds, often marveled at how quickly former enemies had become friends. Corvan doctors worked alongside species they had once oppressed. Former slaves taught their children to forgive their former masters. Humans taught us that strength comes from lifting others up, not pushing them down, a young Corvan medical student told her. That lesson changed everything. The galaxy that emerged from the ashes of the Corvan Empire was more prosperous, more peaceful, and more creative than anything that had come before. It was built on a simple idea that had taken one species from a small blue world to teach the stars. Everyone deserved to be free.